Ethan Cole never imagined the night his marriage would shatter would begin with a whisper. For months, his wife had flinched at his touch, turning intimacy into a forbidden territory, one he blamed himself for trespassing. She said she was exhausted, overwhelmed, not in the right headspace. He believed her. He waited. He hurt quietly. But tonight, under the soft glow of their bedroom lamp, Maya looked at him with sudden eagerness and said she wanted a baby. Their baby, as if the loneliness she had carved into their home had never existed. And Ethan, staring into the eyes of the woman he still loved, felt the truth burning in his chest, because weeks ago he discovered something she never expected him to know, something that made her request impossible, and exposed a betrayal far deeper than silence. A storm was coming, and this was only the first crack of thunder. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. In the quiet coastal town of Harborview, Ethan Cole had always believed that the strongest structures weren't built from steel or concrete. They were built from trust. It was the principle that guided him as an architect, and the promise he carried into his marriage. He had fallen for Maya Thompson long before she ever became Maya Cole. From the moment he met her, an ambitious, sharp-witted marketing manager, with laughter that filled whatever room she entered, Ethan felt pulled toward her like a tide he couldn't fight. Their early years together felt almost unreal, a montage of warmth and discovery. They spent weekends exploring quiet cafes tucked between the cliffs and the harbor, sharing pastries and future plans over steaming cups of coffee. Ethan loved how Maya dreamed aloud about traveling to Europe, seeing the northern lights, climbing the career ladder until she reached a place where people would know her name before she introduced herself. She wanted a life that shimmered, one built on momentum and upward motion. Ethan didn't need shimmering. He needed steady, grounded foundations, a stable job, a modest home, a love that felt like a place to return to. But he admired Maya's ambition. It fascinated him, challenged him, made him want to be better without ever pressuring him to be someone else. Or so he thought. He remembered their first anniversary. They had gone to a small vineyard outside the city. She wore a soft yellow dress that fluttered whenever the wind passed, and he thought she looked like sunlight turned into a person. She teased him for being sentimental when he told her how lucky he felt, but she smiled sweetly when she thought he wasn't looking like she believed it too. Back then, intimacy wasn't just a part of their marriage, it was woven into its foundation. They held each other with ease, with warmth, with the kind of passion that made ordinary nights feel cinematic. They talked openly, shared fears, argued with tenderness, forgave quickly, and made up slowly, wrapped in sheets and promises. But as the years drifted by, something subtle shifted. Ethan couldn't pinpoint the moment it began. Maybe that was the cruelest part. The unraveling wasn't loud. It didn't come as a dramatic confession or explosive argument. It came like erosion, gradual, invisible at first, until one day he noticed cliffs where there used to be shoreline. Maya started staying later at work. She came home buzzing with victory after pitching new campaigns, mentioning office politics and promotions with a gleam of hunger in her eyes. She was talented, driven, magnetic. People recognized that, and she thrived on the recognition. Ethan admired her, the way she commanded a room, the way she never backed down from a challenge. But admiration slowly became mixed with a quieter feeling he didn't want to name: distance. Some nights she would collapse onto the couch, scrolling through her phone with tired eyes. Other nights she seemed energized, almost especially one name. Adrian Blake. Ethan had never met the man, but he heard about him more times than he could count. Adrian was confident, charming, endlessly sociable, the kind of person who thrived in marketing circles. Maya spoke about him the way one might speak about a mentor or a rival or something else. Still, Ethan trusted her. He had to. What was marriage without trust? One evening, he suggested they take a weekend trip, a small cabin near the harbor cliffs. Nothing extravagant, just a chance to be alone together, away from work, away from distractions, a chance to reconnect. Maya laughed softly, shaking her head. "Oh, Ethan, I can't. Not this month. We have a huge campaign launch, and my team needs me. Maybe later." "Okay." He nodded, hiding the disappointment tugging at him. Yeah, later. But later never came. There was always another deadline, another work event, another obligation. At first, Ethan blamed her job. He blamed stress, pressure, ambition. But a small voice inside him, one he didn't want to hear, whispered, "You are no longer her priority." He tried to smother the thought with kindness. He cooked her dinners she rarely finished. He tidied their apartment, hoping she'd notice the effort. He left small notes for her, just reminders that he loved her, that he was here, that he cared. Sometimes she smiled and kissed his cheek. Sometimes she barely noticed. But the moment that stayed with him happened on a quiet Tuesday night. Ethan had picked up a bouquet of lilies from a small flower shop downtown, Maya's favorite. He placed them in a vase by the dining table and waited for her to come home. When she walked in, he greeted her with a hopeful grin. "Thought you could use something beautiful after a long day." Maya paused. The appreciation in her expression flickered only for a second before fading under exhaustion. "They're lovely, Ethan. Thank you. But I'm really tired. I think I'll just take a shower and go to bed early." She walked past him, past the flowers, past the effort. That was the moment the ache started to bloom in him, quiet but persistent. He began replaying memories in his head, searching for clues he might have missed. He wondered if he had changed, if he had become boring, predictable, not enough. Self-blame came easier than suspicion. It always had. He tried again that weekend. Suggested making breakfast together, taking a walk, watching the sunset from their balcony the way they used to. But Maya brushed each idea aside. Wrapped in her own world, orbiting farther and farther away, Ethan told himself this was part of marriage. People grew, shifted, and became different versions of themselves. But he didn't recognize the woman Maya was becoming. Not fully, not enough to understand her, and yet he still loved her. That was the cruelest part. He loved the girl he married, the woman she had been, the partner he believed she could still be if they just found their way back. But life rarely rewinds. One evening, while sitting at their dining table, Ethan found himself staring at the empty chair across from him. He imagined her laughing there like she used to, teasing him about his overseasoned pasta or telling him stories about her coworkers. He imagined them holding hands over the table, planning their next adventure. Instead, he sat alone, listening to the city hum outside their window. He wondered when exactly he had started eating dinner by himself, even when they lived under the same roof, even when they shared the same bed. The marriage still existed on paper, in photographs, in rings, but Ethan felt something slipping away, and deep down, he sensed it wasn't just the intimacy that was fading, it was the truth. He just didn't know yet how far the truth would go. But soon, he would. And it would break everything he thought he knew about his life, his marriage, and the woman he had vowed to love. The silence didn't come all at once. It crept in, slowly. Like a draft Ethan hadn't noticed at first, a subtle change in the temperature of his marriage. The shift was so gradual that for weeks, maybe months, he convinced himself it was normal. All couples experienced lulls, didn't they? That's what he read late at night when he searched for answers online. scrolling through relationship forums lit by the cold glow of his phone. At first, Maya still kissed him goodnight, still curled her body near his, still mumbled that she loved him, though her voice often sounded distant, as if she were speaking from another room. But intimacy, real intimacy, slowly began to fade. It started with small moments of hesitation. Ethan would reach for her waist, and she would flinch, just barely, before smoothing the reaction over with a soft laugh. "Sorry, babe, sensitive today." Then she'd roll away. Pulling the blanket with her, he took her explanation at face value. He always took her explanations at face value. By the third week, Maya's rejections had taken shape. "Not tonight, Ethan. I'm exhausted. I have a headache. I'm feeling bloated. Tomorrow. Okay." Tomorrow never came. Ethan tried to be patient. Maya's job was demanding. He'd heard her complain about incompetent coworkers, last-minute presentations, and impossible client expectations. If she was tired, then of course he needed to be understanding. He prided himself on being patient, on being the kind of husband who cared more about her comfort than his ego. But deep inside him, a quiet ache began to grow, not just from the lack of touch, but from the unspoken distance forming like glass between them. He tried to compensate. He cooked her favorite meals, creamy pasta with roasted garlic, lemon herb, chicken, stir-fry with jasmine rice. But most nights, she picked at her food or ate mechanically, eyes glued to her phone as she typed messages he never saw. He bought her a soft throw blanket after she mentioned feeling cold at work. She thanked him, but the blanket stayed folded on the couch untouched. He planned a surprise movie night, complete with popcorn and the rom-com she adored, but she came home that night drained, claiming she needed to catch up on emails before bed. Ethan tucked away his disappointment like a secret. He didn't want to be a burden. But over time, it became impossible to deny the pattern. She didn't just avoid intimacy, she avoided closeness. Physical, emotional, all of it. When Ethan reached for her hand on the couch, she would gently pull away to grab her water. When he kissed her shoulder in bed, she would shift, murmuring something about needing more space. He tried to tell himself it wasn't deliberate, that stress could turn anyone inward, that couples went through phases, that he wasn't losing her, not really. But the worst moments came late at night, when he lay awake staring into the darkness, watching the rise and fall of Maya's back as she slept facing away from him. He would pull the blanket up to her shoulders, even when she brushed him off in her sleep, and every time he moved closer, she somehow drifted farther. Still, Ethan didn't allow himself to imagine anything sinister. Suspicious men were controlling, toxic. He refused to become one of them. So instead of questioning her, he questioned himself. Maybe he wasn't romantic enough anymore. Maybe he wasn't interesting. Maybe she was bored. Maybe she wished she had married someone more driven, more ambitious, more exciting. He changed small things about himself. New haircut, more fitted shirts, an extra gym session each week. But none of it stirred the kind of warmth he longed to see in her eyes. And still, Ethan tried. One evening, he sat beside her on the couch while she scrolled through her phone. "Hey, can we talk?" Maya looked up, mildly irritated, as though he had interrupted something important. "About what?" He took a breath. "Us. I feel like things have been different lately. You seem distant." Her brows furrowed, then smoothed into a practiced softness. "Ethan, I've told you I'm just stressed. Work is insane. You know that." "I know," he replied gently. "I just miss you. That's all." Her expression cooled almost instantly. "Are you saying I'm not doing enough? Because that's kind of unfair." His heart dropped. "I didn't mean, you know how hard I've been working, and now you're making me feel guilty for being tired." "No, Maya, I." She stood up, pacing. Anger radiated off her in controlled waves. "Maybe I wouldn't be so exhausted if I didn't have to worry about disappointing you all the time." Ethan felt the accusation like a slap. "That's not what I'm saying." She crossed her arms, avoiding his gaze. "Just Please don't make this another thing I have to worry about. I'm doing my best." And just like that, the conversation was over. She ended it with a resigned sigh and a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan ended it with an apology he didn't owe. That night, he lay awake again, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in their marriage. He wondered how expressing loneliness had turned into him, causing it. He told himself to stop being dramatic. Nothing was wrong. Everything was fine. But it wasn't, and something inside him knew it. Weeks passed, enough time for Ethan to notice more cracks, each one tiny enough to dismiss alone, but impossible to ignore collectively. There were the late nights she didn't explain, the sudden showers the moment she got home, the faint, unfamiliar cologne he smelled once on her blouse, something rich, masculine, not his, the way she shut her laptop the moment he walked into the room, the playful nervous laugh when he asked, "Who's texting you?" The way she now spent extra time getting ready for work, styling her hair, choosing dresses that accentuated her waistline, or heels that made her 2 inches taller. He told himself it was confidence, not infidelity, but nothing erased the sting of her flinching away from him while radiating energy for everything outside their home. The worst part was that he didn't feel angry. He felt ashamed, like he was failing to meet invisible expectations she no longer bothered sharing with him. One night, after another failed attempt to bring back closeness, Ethan rolled away from her and stared into the shadows of their bedroom. He whispered into the silence, "I just want you back." Maya didn't answer. Maybe she didn't hear him. Maybe she didn't care. But the silence that followed felt like a response. A slow, painful freeze settled over their marriage. And Ethan, still desperate to believe in the woman he loved, couldn't see yet that this frost wasn't accidental. Something was happening behind the scenes, something deliberate, something Maya wasn't ready for him to uncover. But the truth always finds its way to the surface. And Ethan was only a few steps away from discovering the first crack that would unravel everything. Ethan had always believed that communication could fix anything. His parents, married for 40 years, used to tell him that honesty was the lifeblood of a marriage. So, when he woke one morning with a weight on his chest, a pressure he could no longer swallow, he decided to try one more time. Not with hints or quiet gestures, not with flowers or carefully cooked dinners. This time, he would speak plainly. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where sunlight softened the edges of everything, and the house smelled faintly of the coffee he brewed. He found Maya at the dining table, scrolling through her tablet with the same absent expression she wore more often now. She barely looked up when he approached. "Hey," he said gently, "can we talk for a minute?" Maya sighed in a way that made him feel like an inconvenience, but she set the tablet down. "About what?" He pulled out a chair opposite hers, hands clasped tightly. "About us." Her body stiffened. "What about us?" He breathed in through his nose, keeping his voice soft. "I feel like something's off between us. We haven't connected in a while, and I just want to understand what's wrong, what you need, what I can do better." There it was, vulnerability laid bare. Ethan felt exposed, like he was standing under a spotlight. But Maya didn't soften. If anything, her gaze sharpened. "Ethan, seriously, this again?" He flinched. "It's not again. I haven't said anything in months." "Yeah, because I thought you understood," she snapped. "I told you I've been stressed. I told you I'm overwhelmed. I told you lots of things. But you don't seem to hear me, unless it's something about sex." The word hit him like a blow. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "I'm not demanding anything. I'm just hurting, and I want to fix whatever's wrong. So, now I'm the problem." Her voice rose, brittle and sharp. "I never said that. You didn't have to." She shot back. "It's obvious." Ethan's mind scrambled for the right words. "Maya, I'm just saying we've barely touched each other for months. You pull away from me every night. I don't know what's going on, and I feel like I'm losing you." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, panic, guilt. He couldn't tell. because just as quickly it hardened into indignation. She stood abruptly, folding her arms across her chest, as if shielding herself. I can't believe you're making me out to be some kind of villain, because I'm stressed and not in the mood. Do you know how manipulative that sounds? Ethan's breath caught. I'm not trying to manipulate. Oh, really? Because it sure feels like pressure. You asking, hinting, hovering. It's suffocating. He stared at her, stunned. Suffocating. He had walked on eggshells for months, terrified of making her uncomfortable. Maya. I'm not angry, he whispered. I'm sad. But she didn't hear sadness, only accusation. She moved past him toward the living room, pacing with agitation. Why can't you just accept that people go through phases? Why does everything have to be about what you want? You're acting like I owe you something. I never said you owe me anything. But that's exactly how you're acting. His throat tightened. I just want to feel close to you again. That's all. She rolled her eyes. Well, maybe stop obsessing about intimacy and start focusing on being supportive instead of needy. The word needy cut into him more deeply than she knew. Ethan prided himself on being easygoing, gentle, patient. He had never wanted to be the clingy, insecure partner. He swallowed hard. So you're saying this is my fault? I'm saying, she replied coldly, that you're making things worse by constantly bringing it up. I feel judged, pressured, and honestly, a little unsafe emotionally. Ethan felt like the floor shifted beneath him. Unsafe. He had never raised his voice, never touched her without consent, never done anything except try to be kind. Maya, please don't twist this, he said softly. I'm not judging you. I'm trying to save us. She didn't respond. She just crossed her arms tighter and stared at him with an expression that was almost victorious. In that moment, something inside him cracked. Not because she rejected him, he could handle rejection, but because she turned his pain into an attack, because she made his vulnerability look like aggression, because she made him apologize. I'm sorry, he whispered, shame rising like heat under his skin. I'm sorry if I made you feel pressured. I didn't mean to, I just miss you. Maya's posture relaxed just slightly, as if satisfied. Okay, she said coolly. Just don't bring it up again. It stresses me out even more. And just like that, the conversation ended. Not resolved, just dismissed. She returned to her tablet. Ethan returned to the kitchen. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, he felt gaslit. He didn't use that word, yet not out loud, not even in his head, but the sensation was unmistakable. She had turned his fear into her injury. She had weaponized his tenderness. Later that week, Ethan attended a small dinner with some of Maya's coworkers. She insisted he join, said it would be good for the team if spouses came along. Ethan hoped it might help them reconnect. Maybe if he saw her world, she'd let him back into it. The restaurant was upscale, warm lighting casting an amber glow over polished tables. Maya slipped into the room with a glossy confidence Ethan hadn't seen in months. Around her colleagues, she was magnetic, sharp, witty, smiling easily. He watched her, wondering where this version of her went when they were alone. Then he noticed the man she kept laughing with, the one she swatted playfully on the arm, the one whose jokes she reacted to with the warmth she no longer gave him. Adrian Blake, tall, charming, effortlessly charismatic. He wore confidence like a tailored suit. This is the husband, Adrian exclaimed when Maya introduced Ethan. The architect. I've heard so much about you. Ethan smiled politely, shaking the man's hand. Good things? I hope. Adrian grinned. Of course, but something tightened in Ethan's stomach when he saw the way Maya's eyes lingered on Adrian before darting away. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it wasn't how a wife looked at a coworker. Throughout the dinner, Maya spoke more to Adrian than anyone else. They shared inside jokes Ethan didn't understand, small glances he couldn't interpret, and a closeness he felt excluded from. When he placed his hand gently on her back, she tensed, barely noticeable, but he noticed. And when Adrian did the same while guiding her past a server, she didn't react at all. A pinched feeling grew in Ethan's chest. But he said nothing. He didn't want to seem jealous or insecure. On the drive home, Maya was unusually quiet. So was he. He thought about asking her whether she was happy, whether she still wanted him, whether something was going on with Adrian. But he couldn't shake the memory of their last conversation, how quickly she flipped the narrative, how easily she wielded guilt like a blade. Ethan was too afraid of being painted as controlling to ask the questions echoing inside him. That night, he lay beside her again, the distance between their bodies feeling like an ocean. He reached for her hand, she pulled away in her sleep, and Ethan closed his eyes, wondering how long a man could convince himself he wasn't drowning. The human mind has a way of protecting itself from truths it isn't ready to face. For Ethan, this meant turning every red flag into a misunderstanding, every suspicion into an overreaction, and every pang of intuition into self-doubt. He didn't want to believe Maya was slipping away from him, so he invented reasons for the pieces of her that kept disappearing, but some signs were too sharp to soften. It happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. Ethan arrived home early from a site visit, hoping to surprise Maya with a homemade dinner. He wanted to try again, try to rekindle something, anything, before the distance between them turned permanent. While tidying the bedroom, he noticed something unusual, a receipt tucked beneath her jewelry box. He picked it up, thinking it was nothing. Then his breath stilled. It was from a high-end dry cleaning service downtown, dated 2 days prior. The item, a designer cocktail dress. A dress he had never seen. A dress she had never worn home. His mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was an old receipt she'd forgotten about. Maybe she bought a dress on sale. Maybe. But the receipt was crisp, fresh, unmistakable. He set it back exactly where he found it, his fingers trembling. That night, when Maya returned home, her smile seemed too bright, her movements too rehearsed. She kissed his cheek, complimented the smell of his cooking, and chatted quickly about her crazy day. Her hair was perfectly styled, her perfume strong, almost as if she'd reapplied it right before walking through the door. Ethan listened, nodding, trying not to study her too closely, but the seed of doubt had sprouted. And doubt, once planted, never dies quietly. 2 days later, another clue arrived, subtle but unmistakable. A charge appeared on their shared credit card statement, Harborview Grand Hotel. The date matched one of the late nights she claimed to be fixing an emergency at work. Ethan stared at the statement on his laptop screen for nearly 10 minutes, his heart thudding against his ribs. He tried to breathe, tried to steady himself, but something inside him unraveled thread by thread. She had lied. She had lied directly, not exaggerated, not forgotten. Lied. When he finally gathered the courage to bring it up the next morning, he did it carefully, gently, like handling fragile glass. Maya, I was looking over the card charges. Did you have an event at the Harborview Grand this week? Her eyes flickered just for a moment, but it was enough. Oh, yes. A last-minute client thing. We booked a conference room to strategize a pitch. I thought I mentioned it. She waved a hand dismissively. You know how hectic work has been. Ethan swallowed. You came home late that night. Really late. Yes, she said, irritation creeping into her tone. Because it was a big event, Ethan. I swear. Do I need to report every hour of my day to you now? His face paled. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean? Because this, she gestured sharply between them, is starting to feel like an interrogation. I just asked one question, Ethan whispered, and I answered. She snapped. She pushed past him to grab her purse. I need to go. I don't have time for this. The door slammed behind her, leaving Ethan in the quiet aftermath of a conversation that felt both scripted and weaponized. She didn't comfort. She didn't clarify. She attacked, every time. And now he noticed how flawlessly she turned suspicion into guilt. Just like before, how quickly she flipped fear onto him like a mirror. How effortlessly she made him apologize for his own hurt. He felt sick. That evening, Maya came home, smelling faintly of something he couldn't place. Not her usual floral perfume, but something deeper, woody, and masculine. His stomach twisted. He asked gently, "Did you go out after work?" She blinked, too slowly. "No." "Why? You smell different." Maya stiffened. "So now I'm being interrogated about smells. Ethan, this is ridiculous. I didn't mean, you never mean anything." "But here we are," she cut in sharply. "Maybe focus on something other than policing me." She stormed into the shower. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, policing her, interrogating, unsafe, overly needy. She used the same vocabulary every time, like the phrases weren't hers, like someone had taught her what to say to flip blame. The water ran in the bathroom for nearly 40 minutes. When she finally emerged, her mood had softened again, fake, airy, as if nothing had happened. Ethan didn't recognize her. Not anymore. Not fully. And yet, he still loved her. That made every red flag hurt twice as much. For the first time in their marriage, Ethan didn't try to approach her, didn't try to fix the tension, didn't reach for her hand or ask about her day. He was afraid of what she might say, and worse, what she wouldn't. Later that night, he awoke from a restless sleep and noticed Maya wasn't in bed. Her side was cold. He found her in the living room, sitting in the dark, with only the glow of her phone illuminating her face. "What are you doing up?" he asked, voice rough, startled. She locked her screen instantly. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Couldn't sleep. You've been out here a while." "Ethan, don't start." He froze, stung by her tone. "I wasn't starting anything," he whispered. She brushed past him without replying, leaving behind the faint scent of that same unfamiliar cologne. Days passed in a tense, muted pattern. Maya's rejections became less apologetic and more defensive. Her late nights became more frequent. Her mood swings more erratic. And Ethan was losing his grip on himself. He blamed himself for noticing too much, for asking questions she didn't want to answer, for wanting his wife, for hoping she still wanted him. But underneath the guilt, something darker simmered, something he had never felt before: suspicion. One night, while putting a pile of laundry into the hamper, Ethan found a shirt of hers with a cologne scent so strong, he stepped back. His hands trembled as he held the fabric. This one wasn't subtle. This wasn't the hint of someone who brushed against her in a hallway. This was someone close, someone she had been near for a long time. His chest tightened as realization clawed at him. But he wasn't ready. Not fully, not yet. Instead, he sat on the bedroom floor, with that shirt balled in his hands, and sobbed quietly into the fabric, breathing in a stranger's scent mixed with his wife's perfume. He cried because he didn't want to believe what his body already knew. He cried because once he acknowledged the truth, he couldn't go back to pretending. He cried because he loved her more than the truth loved him back. When he finally calmed down, he put the shirt into the hamper and turned off the bedroom light. The world felt colder when he climbed into bed alone. He promised himself he wouldn't ask questions anymore, not because he trusted her, but because he feared her answers would break him. But even silence cannot protect a man forever. The truth has a heartbeat. It demands to be heard. And soon, it would be impossible for Ethan to ignore the rhythm of betrayal pounding right in front of him. He just didn't know it yet. But within days, he would witness a moment so undeniable, so breathtakingly painful, that he could never return to the man he was before. There are moments in a man's life that divide everything into before and after. Moments that arrive without warning and leave behind a quiet, irreversible fracture. For Ethan, that moment began on an evening that should have been ordinary, mundane even, but it would become the night everything tilted. The night truth stopped whispering and began to roar. It started with a text: "Maya, late night, client emergency, don't wait up." Ethan stared at the message on his phone. The words were familiar, too familiar. He'd received versions of them at least a dozen times in the last 2 months. And yet, something in his chest tightened. A subtle instinct he had spent weeks trying to ignore, Pulsed stronger. He typed back, "Do you need dinner? I can bring something." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Appeared again, vanished. Finally, her reply came. "No, seriously, it's chaos here. Just go to bed." A lie always creates a specific kind of silence, one that hums. Ethan stood in the kitchen, hands braced against the counter. He tried to breathe through the familiar ache of uncertainty. Part of him wanted to accept her words, to continue the routine of pretending nothing was wrong. But the stillness in the apartment felt different tonight, a little heavier, as if the truth itself were holding its breath. He wanted to fight the feeling. He wanted to stay home. He wanted to be the trusting husband. Instead, he grabbed his keys. It wasn't anger that drove him, it was loneliness, the kind that hollowed him out until he felt more like a ghost moving through his own home. As he drove, the sky darkened into a cold shade of navy, the kind that blurred streetlights into soft halos. He picked up a takeout bag from Maya's favorite Thai restaurant, drunken noodles with basil chicken, extra spicy, the dish he used to bring her during late nights early in their marriage. He wanted to believe the gesture still mattered. The drive to her office building felt longer than usual. Every red light stretched into an eternity. By the time he arrived, his palms were damp against the steering wheel. The building was mostly dark, except for a few scattered lights across upper floors. Ethan checked the directory. Maya's team worked on the 8th floor. He took the elevator up, the takeout bag warm in his hands, giving him a sense of purpose he didn't feel inside. When the doors slid open, he stepped into a hallway, buzzing faintly with fluorescent lights. Silence greeted him. Not work chatter, not the hurried footsteps of a team rushing to meet a deadline, not even the low hum of conversation behind closed conference rooms. Just emptiness. Ethan walked through the office, his footsteps soft against the carpet. Desks were abandoned, chairs pushed neatly in, monitors dark. Even the cleaning staff had come and gone. The entire place felt like it had been asleep for hours. He checked the conference rooms empty, the lounge empty, Maya's desk neatly arranged, untouched. Confusion clawed at him. He approached the front reception desk, where a sleepy-looking security guard flipped through channels on a tiny television. When Ethan greeted him, the man glanced up with mild curiosity. "Hi," Ethan began. "My wife works here, Maya Cole. She said she was here late with a client emergency. I was hoping to surprise her with dinner." The guard furrowed his brow. "Client emergency. Everyone cleared out earlier. Around 7, I think." Ethan's heart stuttered. "Are you sure?" "Oh yeah." The man nodded. "Most people left together. Your wife too, I think. She left with that tall guy from marketing, Adrian something." The world seemed to tilt. The takeout bag slipped slightly in Ethan's grip. Adrian Blake. "Yeah, that's the one." The guard squinted. "Nice guy. Always jokes with us downstairs." Ethan swallowed hard. "Are you sure she left with him?" "Oh yeah," the guard said casually. "He was carrying some binder, and they walked out talking. Looked like they were in a hurry." Ethan felt his lungs tighten. He thanked the guard mechanically and walked away. Though his legs felt wooden beneath him, he stepped into the elevator, heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the closing doors. The takeout bag hung limply from his hand, steam fogging slightly against the paper. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He didn't scream. He simply felt a coldness settle inside him, quiet, sharp, undeniable. When the elevator reached the parking garage, he walked toward his car, each step echoing in the cavernous space. He sat behind the wheel, staring forward, breath shallow. He imagined Maya and Adrian walking out together, imagined the easy way she laughed with him, imagined all the little signs that suddenly made perfect sense. He didn't drive away immediately. Instead, he waited. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. His thoughts spun in circles until the lines between memory and fear blurred. Eventually, headlights appeared. Maya's car pulling into the garage back home. Ethan's heart seized. He saw her step out beautiful, composed, wearing a faintly flushed expression. She wasn't tired. She wasn't stressed. She looked vibrant. He entered their apartment seconds after she did. She was taking off her heels, humming lightly another blade to his chest. "Hey," she said cheerfully when she saw him. "Sorry I'm late. You wouldn't believe the mess we had to deal with tonight." Ethan stood in the doorway, the takeout bag dangling from his hand. "Yeah. Must have been a long night." She nodded, oblivious, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Totally drained. I'm going to shower. I smell like the office." Ethan inhaled. She didn't smell like the office. He followed her into the hallway, voice soft, too soft for the fury building inside him. "Maya, were you alone at the office?" She paused, then she turned, smiling a little too brightly. "Of course! Why?" "No one there saw you." Her smile stiffened. "Well, everyone left early. I stayed behind. And, Adrian," something flickered in her eyes too fast to catch if he weren't studying every inch of her. "What about Adrian?" she asked, voice tight. "Did you leave with him?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, Ethan. Seriously, are we doing this insecure husband routine now? I told you I was working. You need to stop obsessing about my coworkers." "I wasn't obsessing," he whispered. "I asked one question, and I answered." She snapped. "Can we not ruin tonight? I'm exhausted." She brushed past him into the bathroom. The door clicked shut. The shower turned on. Ethan stood alone in the hallway, the steam from the abandoned takeout rising as silently as the truth he couldn't unlearn. He walked to the kitchen, set the bag down, and leaned heavily against the counter. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he didn't demand, because tonight wasn't the night for confrontation. Tonight was the night he stopped believing her lies. The shift was subtle, a quiet snapping inside him, not loud enough to hear, but deep enough to feel. From this point on, Ethan would no longer excuse the signs. He would no longer apologize for his instincts. He would no longer let her rewrite reality. Tonight was the night Ethan Cole stopped being a confused husband and became a silent investigator. And the truth he would uncover next would not just confirm his suspicions, it would destroy the foundation of everything he thought he knew about his marriage. The next morning, the apartment felt unnaturally quiet, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. Maya moved around the kitchen, humming softly, pretending everything was normal. She poured her coffee, checked her phone every few seconds, smiled at texts she didn't share, and kissed Ethan lightly on the cheek before heading out the door. The kiss felt rehearsed, performed, a gesture meant to maintain an illusion. And for the first time, Ethan didn't kiss her back. He let her lips brush his skin like a stranger's touch. When the door closed behind her, Ethan remained frozen in the kitchen, gripping the counter edge until his knuckles whitened. His heart wasn't racing he almost wished it were. Instead, he felt an eerie stillness inside, a cold clarity he had never known before. Last night, something had shifted. He wasn't going to ask any more questions. He wasn't going to beg for honesty. He wasn't going to let her guilt him into silence. No, he would look for the truth himself, not because he wanted to destroy her, but because he needed to stop destroying himself. He sat at the dining table with his laptop open, hands trembling slightly as he typed in the password. The screen illuminated the room with cold blue light. He opened their online bank account, first a mundane action, harmless on the surface, except nothing about it felt harmless anymore. At first, he scrolled through the transactions too quickly, unable to focus. But then he forced himself to slow down, to breathe, to see. There it was again. Harborview Grand Hotel, multiple charges, each one dated on nights. Maya returned home late, each one labeled as generic transaction descriptions. Nothing obvious or incriminating, unless someone was looking closely. He clicked through months of statements. The pattern wasn't new. The pattern wasn't small. The pattern was undeniable. Some charges were at restaurants he had never been to. Some were for late-night parking garages on the opposite side of town. Some were paired with Uber rides taken minutes apart. On the same nights she told him she was overwhelmed with work. A chill spread through him as the dates aligned in perfect, devastating clarity. For weeks, maybe months, she had been building two lives, and Ethan had been living in the wrong one. A faint ringing filled his ears, the kind that comes when the world tilts too quickly. He pushed the laptop away, burying his face in his hands. His breath cracked, breaking into trembling fragments. He wasn't angry. Not yet. Just heartbroken, crushed, ashamed that he had needed proof at all. After several minutes, he forced himself upright. He needed to do something, anything, to stop the spiraling in his chest. And that's when the idea formed. Not revenge, not confrontation, just clarity. He needed to know the truth, not her version of it. He pulled out his phone, opening an app he rarely used except for car maintenance reminders. Their shared vehicle was connected to a tracking system, something they installed for emergencies years ago. Ethan had never opened the location feature before. His thumb hovered over the button. He hesitated, guilt swelling like a bruise. Was this wrong? Was he invading her privacy? Was he becoming the insecure man she accused him of being? But then he remembered the cologne on her shirt, the hotel charges, the missing dress, the lies stacked so neatly they almost resembled reliability. He pressed the button. The loading animation spun for several seconds, then displayed a small blue dot on a map. Not at her office, not anywhere near it. The Harborview Grand Hotel. His breath left him in a painful exhale. She wasn't even pretending today. She had lied effortlessly this morning, humming in the kitchen, while her car idled outside a hotel she claimed to have no connection to. The betrayal was no longer vague or abstract. It was concrete, geographical, time-stamped. Ethan's hand shook as he locked his phone. For a long time, he simply stood there still, empty, unable to categorize the cold ache spreading inside him, but something in him hardened. He wasn't going to confront her yet, not while he was this raw, not while he still hoped for explanations that wouldn't come. Instead, he gathered a small notebook from his desk and wrote down the date, time, and address. Each stroke of his pen felt like carving the truth into stone. He needed a record, not for revenge, but for sanity. That evening, when Maya came home, she looked radiant again, flushed, energized, glowing in a way she hadn't around him in months. "Long day," she said, kicking off her heels and sighing dramatically. "I bet," Ethan replied quietly. She paused. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head. "Just tired." She accepted the answer too easily, too eagerly, and disappeared into the bathroom for another unusually long shower. Ethan sat on the couch listening to the water run. He wondered if she was washing away guilt or simply washing away evidence. He didn't ask. He couldn't. A confrontation now would only give her more room to manipulate, to twist, to cry her way out of responsibility. He needed more. He needed undeniable clarity. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes. The next afternoon, Ethan left work early. He told his team he had a doctor's appointment. They wished him well, none suspecting the invisible weight he carried. He parked on a quiet street near the hotel, far enough not to be noticed, but close enough to see the entrance. His chest tightened as minutes turned into hours. Anxiety pulsed through him, but he forced himself to stay. Then, sometime after 4, her car pulled in. Maya stepped out wearing a fitted blouse he had never seen before. Something sharp, stylish, intentionally alluring. Her makeup was immaculate, though she had claimed to be too rushed to get ready that morning. She checked her reflection in the window, smoothing her hair with practiced care. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't anxious. She was excited. When Adrian appeared, greeting her with a hand on her lower back, something inside Ethan crumbled so quietly, it almost didn't make a sound. They moved together with an ease Ethan hadn't seen from her in months. Her laughter rang out lightly genuine, warm, alive. That laughter used to be his. Ethan didn't get out of the car. He didn't yell. He didn't take dramatic photos or demand answers. He simply watched, frozen, as the two of them entered the hotel. His wife, her coworker, his reality shattered. He stayed in the car long after they vanished inside. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there, numb, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles blanched. When he finally drove home, the sunset painted harbor view in soft hues of gold and rose. It should have been beautiful, but Ethan saw none of it. He walked into their apartment in silence. When Maya returned later, her hair damp from a shower he hadn't seen her take, she kissed him sweetly on the cheek. "Sorry, I'm late again," she said. "Work is insane." He nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah," he murmured. "I bet." She didn't see the pain in his eyes, and she didn't see the first spark of resolve forming behind it. Tonight, she still controlled the narrative. But tomorrow, the truth would start writing itself. The mind protects itself in strange ways. In the days after Ethan watched Maya walk into the Harborview Grand Hotel with Adrian, his body moved through life as if nothing had happened, but his spirit felt hollowed out, stripped of its familiar shape. He went to work, responded politely to colleagues, attended meetings, and even smiled when appropriate. But beneath the surface, something fundamental was shifting quietly, irrevocably. He no longer lived in uncertainty. He lived in confirmation, and confirmation was far more brutal. The first night after witnessing the betrayal, he barely slept. He lay awake, listening to Maya breathe softly beside him. Her back turned toward him as always. Her scent, once comforting, felt foreign, tainted by knowledge he could no longer unsee. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment she had stepped toward Adrian outside the hotel, the way she lifted her chin as if presenting herself to someone who deserved her best. He remembered the hand on her lower back, the easy confidence with which Adrian guided her inside, the familiarity between them, the kind of familiarity that comes only from repetition. He wondered when it began. He wondered how many times he had kissed her goodnight after she had spent the evening in someone else's arms. He wondered how long she had been lying with a straight face while he slowly unraveled. By dawn, he still hadn't closed his eyes. Maya woke cheerfully, stretching with a soft groan. "Morning," she murmured, rolling out of bed. "Ugh, I feel like I didn't sleep at all." Ethan didn't respond. He didn't trust his voice not to break. She didn't notice. She rarely did anymore. As days passed, Ethan began to observe more closely. Not because he wanted to torture himself, he just couldn't stop noticing what had once been invisible, like how she smiled at her phone in the mornings before she even said good morning to him, like how she hummed while getting ready, but only on days she ended up working late, like how she wore expensive perfume on nights she claimed to be exhausted, like how she guarded her phone with military precision, tilting the screen away from him, never leaving it unattended. Adrian's name appeared often enough in conversation to sound natural, but not so often that it drew attention. That balance alone told Ethan everything. But Maya wasn't just cheating, she was performing. She crafted deceptions the way artists sculpt marble, deliberately, patiently, beautifully. Ethan realized something chilling. She didn't just lie to protect herself. She lied because she believed he would never question her. She lied because she thought he would never know. She lied because, in her mind, Ethan was safe, predictable, soft, loving to a fault, and for much of their marriage, she had been right. But she didn't know him now. On the 5th day, after the hotel sighting, Ethan made a decision. He needed undeniable proof, not photos from a distance, not assumptions, not credit card charges or unexplained outfits. He needed truth so concrete it couldn't be spun or softened or blamed back on him. Something no apology could rewrite, no manipulation could twist. He needed to see everything. The next morning, he left work at lunchtime and drove to a quiet electronics store on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where questions were minimal and cash was accepted for everything. He bought a small device, barely the size of a thumb drive, a GPS tracker. He told himself it was for safety. He told himself it was logical. He told himself any husband would want to know where his wife was in an emergency. But the truth was simpler. He needed to stop living blind. At home, he hid the device inside the lining beneath the passenger seat of Maya's car. It took less than 10 seconds. His hands shook the entire time. By evening, the app showed her car heading to a familiar destination, the office, except Ethan already knew what that really meant. 3 hours later, the dot hovered near the Harborview Grand Hotel again. He didn't follow her this time. He didn't need to. He just wrote down the time, date, and location in the small notebook he kept hidden behind his toolbox. Each page filled with neat handwriting, a chronicle of betrayal. Day after day, the evidence built, patterns emerged, roots repeated. It was almost clinical, the way she compartmentalized her life. Ethan felt like a detective piecing together a case, except the case was his marriage, and the victim was his own heart. One rainy evening, after tracking her location for nearly 2 weeks, Ethan parked near the hotel again. He didn't know why he came. Maybe he needed to feel the world move around him while his life stalled. Maybe he needed to remind himself he wasn't imagining things. The rain blurred the windshield, turning lights into watercolor streaks. Ethan sat silently as his wipers squeaked rhythmically across the glass. Then he saw her. Not entering the hotel this time, leaving it, she hurried through the canopy as rain cascaded around her. Her hair was slightly tousled, her lipstick faintly smudged. Adrian walked beside her, the two of them sharing a close, intimate laugh, the kind couples shared. Not co-workers, Adrian held an umbrella above both of their heads, positioning it closer to her than to himself. His hand brushed her arm as he said something that made her smile softly, tenderly, a smile Ethan hadn't received in months. Ethan lowered himself in the seat instinctively, heart hammering, though neither of them looked in his direction. They were in their world, a world where Ethan didn't exist. He watched as Adrian gently opened the door of her car, shielding her from the storm. She touched his chest lightly in thanks, a casual gesture loaded with meaning. Ethan saw her body language open. Warm, familiar. He had once been that comfort for her, not anymore. When she drove away, Ethan remained parked for a long time. Numbness was its own kind of hell. Later, when she walked into their apartment carrying a to-go bag, as if she had just grabbed a late dinner after the office emergency, she greeted him with a breezy smile. "You're still up. I thought you'd be asleep." Ethan glanced at the clock. "Midnight? I couldn't sleep," he said quietly. She kissed his cheek, just a brush of lips, perfunctory before setting her things down. "You should rest," she murmured. "I might have another early morning tomorrow." He nodded. He didn't ask anything. He didn't challenge her story. That terrified her, more than any accusation could have. Later, when she showered again longer than usual, Ethan sat on their bed, staring at her reflection in the fogged bathroom mirror. She moved confidently, as though the world existed only to accommodate her, as though her lies were truths because she said them with conviction. He wondered if she had convinced even herself. That night, Ethan did something he never imagined he would do. He started imagining a life without her. Not because he wanted freedom, but because he finally accepted that he was already alone. He just hadn't admitted it. When Maya returned to bed, sliding under the covers without a word, Ethan lay still. He listened to her, steady breathing, so peaceful, so self-assured. He wondered how someone could sleep so soundly next to the man they were breaking. Ethan stared into the darkness, realization slowly crystallizing in his mind like frost. He no longer knew who Maya was. He didn't know what she wanted. He didn't know how far the betrayal went. But he did know this. He would no longer be a silent casualty. Tomorrow, he would take the next step, the one he had been avoiding. He would find the truth, not just about her affair, but about everything she wasn't telling him, and the truth he uncovered next would shatter his understanding of betrayal all over again. Ethan didn't know what he expected to happen after discovering Maya's affair, but he didn't anticipate the strange calm that settled over him in the days that followed. It wasn't the calm of acceptance or healing, no. This was a hollow, suspended, quiet, the kind that comes right before a storm hits. He moved through their apartment like a visitor, rather than a husband, observing the details of his life from a distance. The framed wedding photo on the mantel, the half-burned candle Maya bought on a whim, the stack of unopened letters reminding him to renew their renter's insurance, tiny relics of a marriage that no longer existed. He began noticing things that never caught his attention before, like how Maya always left the house between 7:15 and 7:25 a.m., no matter what she claimed her schedule was, like how she returned home at wildly inconsistent hours, sometimes early, sometimes long after the sun dipped beyond the Harborview cliffs. Her lies weren't even elaborate, they were lazy, as though she believed the version of Ethan who trusted blindly still lived inside him. He realized something else, too, her sudden sweetness, 3 days in a row. She'd brought home takeout dinners, something she hadn't done in years. One night she walked in, carrying 2 cups of his favorite caramel latte from a cafe near her office. "I thought you looked tired this morning," she said brightly, setting the drinks on the counter. "You deserve a treat." The smile she offered him was wide, warm, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone patting the fall before dropping a larger truth. Ethan didn't drink the latte. She didn't notice. Her bursts of affection were mismatched and jarring. On Monday, she wrapped her arms around him from behind while he washed dishes, whispering, "I love you. You know that, right?" On Tuesday, she didn't speak to him until dinner. On Wednesday, she kissed his temple on her way out the door, something she hadn't done in months. It confused him, then it frightened him, then it made sense. She wasn't being affectionate. She was stabilizing her alibi, the real confirmation, the one that would rip another layer off his already bleeding heart. Came one afternoon when Ethan arrived home early from work. He rarely did, but rain had flooded the construction site he supervised, and his team was sent home for safety reasons. He entered the apartment expecting silence. Instead, the landline was blinking with a missed call notification. They almost never used the landline. Telemarketers, mostly. Ethan considered ignoring it, but something nudged him. He pressed the playback button. A calm, professional voice filled the kitchen. "Hello, Mrs. Cole. This is Dr. Eliza Hart's office, calling to remind you about your missed follow-up appointment. We'd be happy to help you reschedule. Please remember, if you want to proceed within the recommended timeline for conception, it's important we see you again soon. Have a wonderful day." The message ended. Ethan's world didn't explode. It imploded silently, violently, folding inward. Conception, follow-up appointment, recommended timeline. He replayed the message, then again, then again. His ears buzzed with static. His hands trembled around the phone. He had assumed infidelity was the deepest betrayal Maya could inflict, but this was something darker, something calculated, something that went beyond emotional abandonment. She didn't just lie to him about where she spent her nights. She lied to him about planning a future, a family, a child that might not even be his. Ethan sank onto a dining chair, the weight of this new reality crushing him like a collapsing building. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. Every inhale felt shallow, forced, sharp. Why a fertility specialist? Why secret appointments? Why months of refusing intimacy with him? Then the timeline clicked into place. The months she rejected him. The hotel receipts. The sudden warmth. The shift in her mood. The uptick in affection, strategically placed after her meetings with Adrian. She wasn't distancing herself because she'd fallen out of love. She was distancing herself because she was preparing for something, preparing for a baby she didn't intend to conceive with Ethan. His stomach churned. He pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to block out the images forming in his mind. Maya sitting in a bright clinic waiting room, filling out forms, smiling nervously as she prepared her body for a pregnancy, one she planned to pass off as his child, a perfect trap, a legal, emotional, lifelong tether, a betrayal that would bind him forever. A tremor ran down his spine. He needed answers, but not from Maya, Not yet. Hands shaking, he picked up the phone again and dialed the clinic's number from the caller ID. The receptionist answered, cheerful and oblivious. Doctor, Hart's office, how can I assist you? Ethan's throat tightened. Hi, I'm calling to confirm an appointment for my wife, Maya Cole. Oh, the receptionist replied. Specifics, sir. Her tone, however, said enough. Ethan hung up, the receiver feeling heavier now, as if carrying the weight of his unraveling. He sat motionless for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. When the apartment grew dim with the setting sun, he snapped back into himself. Slowly, painfully, there was no question anymore. Maya was planning a pregnancy, a secret one, a weapon disguised as a miracle, and she wanted him to believe the child was his. Grief washed over him in waves. Grief for the marriage he had once cherished. Grief for the man he had been. Grief for the life he thought was real. Then came anger. Not hot, not explosive. Cold, calculated. The same coldness Maya had inflicted on him for months. He didn't hate her. Not yet. But he no longer saw her as the woman he married. A threat wrapped in familiar skin, Ethan stood and moved through the apartment with new eyes. Every framed photo felt like a lie. Every piece of furniture felt like it belonged to another couple entirely. He checked the GPS app again. Her car was parked at her office. She'd told him the team was preparing for a major pitch. He almost laughed at the predictability of her excuses now. His notebook lay open on the table. Pages filled with dates, times, and locations. Proof he never wanted. He added a new entry. Missed fertility appointment. Doctor called. Planning conception. Not with me. His hand trembled as he wrote. When Maya arrived home a few hours later, she greeted him with warmth, forced and sugary. She touched his arm as she passed him in the kitchen. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He simply watched her. Her smile faltered. She sensed something was different. Long day, she asked, casually testing the air. Very, he replied. She kissed his cheek. Mine too. He listened to the lie with silent fury. Later, when she excused herself to take a quick shower, Ethan stood outside the closed door, hearing the water run. He didn't imagine another man this time. He imagined her rehearsing future lies, and he knew what he had to do. He couldn't confront her yet. He wasn't ready. Not emotionally, not strategically. First, he needed to protect himself, because whatever game Maya was playing, it wasn't just betrayal, it was entrapment. And Ethan was done. Being caught unaware, Ethan woke the next morning with a clarity he hadn't felt in months. It wasn't peace. Nothing about this situation was peaceful. It was more like stepping out of a burning building and finally realizing how close the flames had come. His marriage was no longer a partnership, it had become a trap, and he was done waiting for the walls to collapse around him. But clarity didn't bring relief. It brought responsibility. He couldn't simply walk out. He couldn't confront her and hope honesty would surface. He couldn't risk an argument escalating into manipulation or emotional warfare. Not while she was quietly planning something that could tie him to her forever. A baby, not his, but one she clearly hoped to pass off as his. The thought made his stomach twist. All morning, he moved through the apartment, deliberately organizing drawers, answering emails, washing dishes, anything to keep his hands busy as his mind raced with possibilities. He needed a plan, a real one, something airtight, something protective. Every scenario he imagined ended with the same conclusion. He had to control what happened next. He couldn't let Maya decide the future of his life, not while she was building hers on lies. The first step toward safety was terrifyingly simple. He needed to make sure he couldn't be manipulated into fatherhood. Around noon, he called a clinic across town and scheduled a consultation, not for marital therapy, not for stress management, but for something far more irreversible. His voice barely wavered when he gave his name. When he hung up, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. His chest felt tight, stretched between grief and determination. The vasectomy wasn't about punishing Maya. It wasn't even about ending their marriage. It was about survival, self-preservation, breaking free from the web she was weaving around him with each lie. He kept imagining a scenario where Maya discovered she was pregnant and announced it with fabricated joy, claiming it was a sign their marriage had healed. He pictured her hands on her belly, tears on her cheeks, insisting the child was his, using a life to bind him in ways divorce courts never could. The thought of being forced into fatherhood under such circumstances felt like drowning in cement. He wouldn't let that happen. The clinic was quiet that afternoon, tucked between a dental office and a physical therapy center. The waiting room smelled faintly of hand sanitizer and lavender. Ethan checked in under his breath, almost embarrassed by the truth. He wasn't here because he didn't want children. He was here because he didn't want her child, the one conceived under betrayal, weaponized as leverage, handed to him like a trap disguised as family. Dr. Jonah Price entered the room, a man in his mid-50s, with gentle eyes and salt and pepper hair. He didn't look judgmental, just attentive. Ethan appreciated that more than he expected. So, the doctor began, settling into a chair across from him. "How can I help you today?" Ethan hesitated. How could he possibly explain the complexity of what brought him here? The lies, the hotel rooms, the secret fertility appointments, the sudden push for a baby. He couldn't tell the whole story, not without breaking apart in front of a stranger, so he kept it simple. "I'd like to discuss elective sterilization." "Doctor?" Price nodded slowly. "A vasectomy." "Yes. Most patients, considering this procedure, come after a lot of thought," the doctor said gently. "May I ask, what's motivating your decision?" Ethan looked down at his hands. He thought of Maya's perfume mixed with another man's cologne. He thought of the receptionist mentioning conception timelines. He thought of the missed intimacy, the lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting. He thought of the life she was planning without him. "My reasons are personal," he answered quietly. "But I'm certain." "Doctor." Price studied him. Compassion, softening his expression, understood. "It's my job to make sure you're informed, not to interrogate your private life. If you're certain, we can move forward." The consultation was straightforward: medical details, recovery expectations, success rates. Ethan absorbed the information mechanically. When Dr. Price asked him one last time if he was sure, Ethan answered with a steady, unshakable voice. "I'm sure." The procedure was scheduled for later that week. When Ethan left the clinic, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. For a brief moment, he stood beside his car, breathing deeply, letting the gravity of his decision sink into him. It felt like closing a door he could never reopen. And yet, strangely, it also felt like freedom. Not freedom from children, freedom from the trap she was building. That evening, Ethan arrived home and found Maya cooking something she almost never did anymore. Her hair was pinned elegantly, her lipstick perfectly applied. She looked radiant, glowing in a way that would have once made his breath catch. "Surprise?" she said brightly when she noticed him. "I thought I'd treat us tonight. You've been working so hard lately." He raised an eyebrow. "This is unexpected." She laughed lightly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "I'm allowed to spoil my husband, aren't I?" Ethan forced a smile. "Of course." But beneath the warmth in her voice, he sensed calculation. This wasn't guilt-driven affection. It was strategy. A prelude. Stage setting. He watched her move around the kitchen, humming as she prepared the plates. She was trying to convince him of something, trying to build a narrative of closeness, partnership, unity. A narrative she planned to lean on when the time came. When she wanted a baby, he sat at the table, listening to her chatter about work, carefully edited stories, removing details that might unravel her lies. She played the part so well he might have believed her months ago, but now he saw every flaw in the performance. When she reached across the table to squeeze his hand, he didn't pull away. He let her touch him, let her pretend, let her believe he was still the man she could deceive. Inside, though, something hardened. She had no idea the game had changed. She had no idea he was no longer defenseless. She had no idea he was now waiting, not passively, not blindly, but strategically. Later that night, after she kissed him softly and climbed into bed, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The air between them felt charged, artificial, scripted. She shifted, nestling closer, draping an arm across his chest. "Ethan," she whispered, breath warm against his skin. "I've been thinking, maybe we should start trying for a baby soon." His heart didn't stop. It didn't even speed up. Instead, it grew impossibly still. He turned his head toward her. "Really?" She nodded, smiling in the dark. "Yeah, I think I'm ready." Lies layered upon lies, manipulation hidden within tenderness. He kissed her forehead gently. "Let's talk about it soon," he murmured. She smiled, satisfied, and drifted off to sleep. Ethan remained awake long after her breathing deepened. The quiet of the room pressed against him, thick with unspoken truths. Soon, she would make her move. Soon, she would try to trap him with a life-altering lie. Soon, she would think she had won. But Ethan had taken the first step, and when the time came, the truth would break her illusions wide open. Tonight, he finally allowed himself to imagine a future beyond her betrayal, a future she could no longer control. For the next few weeks, Ethan lived in a strange in-between space, a suspended reality where everything looked the same on the outside, yet the air itself felt charged with something hidden. Maya moved through their apartment like a woman newly reborn, her sudden warmth blooming in places she had once left cold and barren. She kissed his cheek in the mornings, left handwritten notes on the counter wishing him a good day, sent random texts during lunch that read, "Thinking of you," as if she hadn't spent the past half-year turning away from his touch. But none of it reached him. Her affection came too late, too suddenly, too strategically. It wasn't love, it was preparation. The shift in her behavior began just days after Ethan's vasectomy, an irony so sharp it almost made him laugh. While he healed quietly from the small but life-changing procedure, she became softer, more attentive, more tactile. Then came the night. Everything clicked into place. He had just finished washing the dishes after dinner when Maya approached him slowly, her expression gentle, almost shy, an expression he hadn't seen since their early years of marriage. She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Ethan," she murmured. "Yeah, I've been thinking." He stiffened, knowing exactly what would come next. "I think I'm ready for us to start a family." There it was, the words she'd rehearsed, the beginning of the next phase in her plan. He turned around carefully, meeting her eyes. The hope glittering in them wasn't maternal joy. He could see that now. It was calculation, a woman building a future she wanted, regardless of the cost to the man standing in front of her. His voice came out smooth, calm. "You're ready." Maya nodded, eyes shining. "More than ready. I feel like this is exactly what our marriage needs. Something meaningful, something to bring us closer again." Closer. She had spent months pulling them apart. Now, with Adrian in the shadows and a trap forming between her hands, she dared to call motherhood a balm, a cure, a tether. Ethan kept his face neutral. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's talk about it." Her relief was instant, too instant. She kissed him with newfound enthusiasm, mistaking his calm for agreement, mistaking his silence for surrender. But as she kissed him, she had no idea that the possibility she was banking on, the conception she was planning, was already biologically impossible. He had taken back the power she thought she controlled. Over the next week, Maya's transformation intensified. She woke earlier than usual to make breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, all arranged neatly like a picture from a glossy magazine. She lit candles during dinner, turned off the lights to create romantic ambience, and leaned into him on the couch, as though physical closeness had never disappeared. She wore silk nightgowns again, the kind she used to wear when their marriage was new and glowing. She would slide into bed beside him, curling into his chest, as though it were the most natural place in the world. And every night, she whispered subtle, softly spoken hints. "I can't wait to see what our baby looks like. You'd be such a good dad. I've been taking vitamins and reading articles about fertility. I think this is our time." Ethan nodded, responding gently, matching her tone, never betraying what he knew. Not yet. Because now that he was certain she wanted a child, the next step was predictable. She would initiate intimacy again. The woman who had spent months avoiding his touch now reached for him at every turn. She brushed her hand against his lower back when walking past him. She climbed into his lap during movie nights. She kissed his neck with exaggerated tenderness. And then, one night, she finally said the words, "Ethan, let's go to bed." He felt her guiding him gently, her eagerness palpable. She kissed him, deeper this time, trailing her fingers down his chest with practiced intention. But something was off. Her kiss was warm, but her eyes were cold. Her voice was soft, but her hands were hurried. Her body pressed close, but her heart was miles away. This wasn't love. This was timing. Ovulation week. She wasn't making love. She was attempting conception. Not for them, for herself, for leverage, for the lie she wanted to build. Ethan gently stopped her, placing a hand on her wrist. "Hey," he whispered. "Slow down." She blinked, a flicker of panic crossing her features before she masked it with a playful smile. "Sorry, I want this, don't you?" He nodded. "Of course I do." But inside, he felt a hurricane of emotions. Rage, sorrow, a bleak awareness that she was treating his body not as something she loved, but as a tool. She kissed him again, and he allowed it not because he wanted her, but because he needed to see it clearly. He needed to see how far she would push her deception. When they were done, she lay against him, breathless and satisfied with herself. "I just know this is it," she murmured. "I have a good feeling." Ethan stared at the ceiling, expression unreadable. Yes, she had a plan, but so did he. And his didn't involve being ensnared by a lie. The shift came the following week. Maya was glowing, vibrant, almost giddy as she went about the apartment. She hummed while cooking, danced her way to the shower, held his hand at random moments with a spark of triumph in her eyes. As if she already believed pregnancy was blooming inside her. Ethan noticed the extra vitamins on the counter, the subtle increase in her temperature-taking routine, the way she checked her cycle app obsessively when she thought he wasn't looking. Every sign pointed to one truth. She thought she'd done it. She thought she'd succeeded. She thought she was pregnant, and then 3 days later it happened. He came home early from work and found her sitting on the edge of their bed, hands trembling as she held a small, white stick. A pregnancy test. Positive. She looked up at him with tears filling her eyes, tears of joy, relief, victory. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice shaking. We did it. We're having a baby." His world narrowed, the room suddenly too quiet. He walked toward her slowly, every step heavy. She stood and threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He held her gently, not trusting himself to speak. She didn't know. She couldn't know. She couldn't know that her announcement didn't fill him with joy, only confirmation. He had been right. She had been lying. And the baby she carried was not his. But Ethan didn't confront her. Not yet. Not while she was celebrating her victory. Not while she believed everything was falling perfectly into place. He kissed the top of her head softly. "Congratulations," he whispered. Her arms tightened around him. "We're going to be a family." But inside, His resolve hardened into something unbreakable. She'd made her move. Now it was time for his. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war, and Ethan was done being the one who didn't know the truth. Soon the truth would come to her doorstep, and when it did, it would destroy the illusion she had built, piece by piece by piece. The moment Maya revealed the positive pregnancy test, Ethan felt the ground beneath him shift, not violently, not with the explosive force he once imagined such a revelation might bring, but with a slow, devastating slide, like the earth giving way beneath quiet footsteps, like the soft crack of thin ice spreading under a man who already knows he's going under. Her arms wrapped around him tightly. Trembling with excitement, she whispered, "We're going to be parents," again and again, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine joy. But Ethan felt nothing. No joy, no anger, no panic, just a hollow ache where love used to live. He held her because he had to, because pulling away would have given everything away too soon. Her happiness was a performance she fully believed in. His comfort was a performance he had to perfect. She leaned back, cupping his face with both hands. "Ethan, this is everything I've ever wanted. Everything we've ever talked about. We ever talked about." The words tasted bitter. He nodded slowly. "Of course, I'm happy for us." She kissed him then softly, reverently, like she had conquered something. Like this moment validated all the lies, all the cheating, all the manipulation. The baby was proof, in her mind, that their marriage was still intact, that she could build a family through deception and convince the world it was love. But the truth was sitting quietly inside his chest, pulsing like a second heartbeat. "It's not mine." Her excitement only grew from that moment. She spent the rest of the evening buzzing around the apartment, Googling prenatal vitamins, bookmarking nursery ideas, sending texts to friends he didn't recognize. She didn't tell anyone directly yet, but she was preparing the story. She wanted to savor the narrative before sharing it. Ethan watched all of it in silence. Later, as they sat together on the couch, she rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "This baby is going to fix everything." His jaw clenched. Fix everything. She thought a child would erase the distance she created, erase the affair, erase her betrayal. She believed motherhood was her redemption arc. But Ethan knew the truth. This child was the final nail in the coffin Maya built with her own hands. Over the next week, Maya's behavior transformed completely. She woke up smiling every morning, wrapped herself around him with an affection that felt foreign now. She cooked breakfast before he even got out of bed, brought him coffee with whipped cream the way he liked, kissed him goodbye at the door, as though she hadn't spent months turning away from him. She monitored her body, obsessively touching her stomach, Googling symptoms, checking pregnancy forums, tracking her diet, and she clung to Ethan like he was the anchor in her perfect little story of the worst part. She looked genuinely happy, not guilty, not conflicted, just happy. Her joy wasn't born of love, it was born of victory, a victory she thought she'd achieved without him ever noticing. One night, she sat cross-legged on the bed with a notebook open, circling baby names. "What do you think of Caleb?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "It's nice. What about Elijah? Too biblical." He forced a smile, a little. She laughed, kicking her feet playfully. "Okay, then maybe Liam. Or Noah. God, I love Noah. It's soft, like someone kind, like someone you can lie to," he thought. She looked up at him again, radiant. "You really are going to be an amazing father, Ethan." He swallowed hard. "We'll see." She didn't notice the hesitation. Her emotional antennae only tuned in when they served her narrative. But even as her affection grew, her anxiety began to flicker in small, telling ways. She asked more questions than usual subtle ones. "Are you excited? Do you feel ready? You're not scared, right? You're not having second thoughts?" Ethan answered every question with calm reassurance. But inside, he sensed the truth. Maya wasn't worried about him being scared. She was worried about him pulling away before her story fully latched onto him. She needed him emotionally invested before revealing the pregnancy to their families. She needed him committed so he wouldn't question anything. She needed him locked in before the truth became impossible to ignore, because once she announced it publicly, the pressure on him would amplify. Social expectations, family excitement, emotional obligation. She was playing chess. He was done being her pawn. A week later, Maya insisted they set up an appointment with an OB/GYN. "We need to make sure everything's okay," she said, placing the phone into his hand. "You call. I want you involved in every step." He almost laughed at the irony. She wanted him involved now. She wanted him so deeply embedded in the narrative that if the truth were ever questioned, he would look like the unstable one. Ethan dialed the number. The receptionist was cheerful, bubbly. "Congratulations to you both. Let's schedule your first prenatal visit." He booked the earliest available appointment. Maya beamed. "See, you're already such a supportive father." But then she added something that pierced him. "I'm so glad you didn't get scared off during the last few months. I know I was distant. I know I wasn't myself. But this is why, Ethan. This is why it all makes sense." She rested her hand on her belly, tenderly. "This baby is our blessing." Ethan held her gaze, expression unreadable. If she only knew how wrong she was. The day of the appointment came. Maya dressed beautifully. Flowy blouse, soft makeup, hair curled with delicate waves. She looked like the poster of a joyful mother-to-be. At the clinic, she practically floated through the waiting room, squeezing Ethan's hand. A young nurse led them to an exam room. Maya sat on the table, legs swinging with nervous excitement. Ethan stayed standing for a moment, staring at the fetal development posters on the wall. He felt the nurse's gentle gaze on him. "Are you excited, Dad?" He forced a nod. "Of course." She smiled warmly. "First baby." He didn't answer. Before she could notice, Maya chimed in. "Yes, first baby. We're so ready." Ethan glanced at her. She didn't even flinch when lying. Not anymore. The nurse left the room momentarily. Maya reached for Ethan's hand. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. "You being calm means everything to me." He squeezed her hand gently, but not out of affection, out of purpose, because he needed her secure. He needed her unsuspecting. He needed the truth to unfold at exactly the right time. And that time wasn't today. Today was about building a record, a trail, a pattern, because when the truth came, when the DNA test proved what he already knew, he wanted zero room for doubt. Not from her, not from himself, not from a courtroom. He sat beside her as the doctor entered, asking routine questions about symptoms, cycles, and conception dates. Ethan listened quietly, storing every word. Maya lied effortlessly. He didn't interrupt. If she wanted to build this fantasy, he would let her build it to the sky, because the higher she climbed, the harder she would fall. When they left the clinic, Maya clung to his arm, glowing. "This is real now," she whispered. "We're really doing this." Ethan kissed her forehead softly, gently. "Yes," he murmured. "We are." But only one of them knew that doing this meant something entirely different. For Maya, it meant the beginning of her perfect family. For Ethan, it meant the beginning of the end. Ethan had always been the type of man who avoided conflict, who believed that patience, kindness, and communication could mend almost anything. But betrayal had a way of reshaping a person from the inside out. It didn't turn him cruel. It didn't turn him violent. It made him precise. Every detail mattered now. Every moment had meaning. Every lie Maya told added another brick to the case. He was quietly, meticulously building. And in this new version of himself, quiet, calculating, controlled, Ethan found a clarity he never expected to possess. After the first prenatal appointment, Maya's glow intensified. She moved through the world as though she had been chosen, ordained, to bring this child into existence. She fussed over vitamins, ordered maternity clothes she didn't yet need, spent hours reading pregnancy articles and watching nursery tours online. Whenever she spoke to him, her voice carried a delicate triumph. The lie had become her security blanket, and she had no idea Ethan was pulling at the threads. Every night, when she fell asleep beside him, he wrote down everything she said and did. He chronicled her statements, her timelines, her moods, and her contradictions, not because he intended to use them now, but because the day would come when the truth would shatter her delusion, and he needed to be ready. But the most critical piece of the puzzle wasn't something Maya said. It was something he heard by accident. 2 weeks after the appointment, they returned to the OB/GYN clinic for routine blood work and genetic screening. Maya insisted on wearing a soft pastel dress, something maternal, as she put it. She walked into the clinic holding Ethan's hand, radiating an almost blinding positivity. If strangers saw them, they would think they were the perfect couple, perfectly aligned, perfectly in love, perfectly deceived. After the appointment, Maya stepped into the restroom. Ethan lingered in the hallway, glancing at pamphlets about prenatal nutrition and fetal development. He tried to read them, but the words blurred. How many fathers had stood here with genuine anticipation? How many had felt joy instead of dread? He closed the pamphlet, trying not to imagine the life he should have had, one built on honesty, not manipulation. Then he heard it, a voice echoing faintly from the other end of the hallway. Yeah, she came with her husband today. Obviously, she brought him. She has to keep pretending. Ethan froze. It was Maya's voice. She was on speakerphone. No, not on speaker, but speaking too loudly into her call, her tone careless and unguarded. He stepped quietly toward the sound, staying behind the corner so she wouldn't see him. Relax, she continued. He's buying it, completely. His pulse hammered in his ears. He has no idea, Maya said, lowering her voice, but not enough. He's just relieved. We're reconnecting. I swear. Adrian, sometimes I think he'd believe anything I tell him. Ethan's stomach twisted. She laughed, a soft, triumphant sound. I told you he wouldn't question the timing. He wants this baby just as much as I do. Or, at least he thinks he does. Silence. A pause, then a softer tone. Of course the baby's yours. Who else would it be? Ethan shut his eyes. He knew the truth already, but hearing her confirm it to someone else, hearing her confess so casually, so confidently, carved into him with vicious precision. Yes, she whispered. I'll tell him when the time is right. Not yet. Right now. He's all in. Exactly where we need him. We, her and Adrian. Ethan stepped back from the corner, heart splintering into pieces he didn't know how to gather. He walked toward the waiting room, just as Maya hung up and emerged from the hallway, smoothing her dress and plastering on a loving smile. Ready to go? She asked, reaching for his hand. He gave it to her. He even smiled. Inside, his world was burning. But outside, he was calm, collected, waiting. Because now, he had confirmation that wasn't just circumstantial. He had her own words. She was planning everything. Manipulating him, keeping him close until her plan was unshakable. Using the pregnancy as a shield. But she had no idea that everything she believed he didn't know. He knew. Later that week, Ethan scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. Secretly, quietly, efficiently, Alicia Monroe. She had sterile, sharp eyes and a reputation for dismantling deceptive spouses with surgical precision. Her office walls were lined with books and framed degrees, and the moment she greeted him, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Safety. He didn't reveal everything at once. He started with the broad outlines, the distance, the suspicion, the hotel charges, the contradictory behavior. Alicia's expression didn't change, but her pen moved swiftly. Then he showed her the notebook, the receipts, the GPS logs, the timelines. Her eyebrows lifted. You've been gathering evidence. I needed the truth, Ethan said quietly. And you have it, she replied. This is thorough. very thorough. Then came the part she didn't expect. I had a vasectomy, Ethan said. Before she tried to get pregnant, it was before the conception date, medically impossible for the child to be mine. Alicia's pen froze. Do you have documentation? He slid the medical record across her desk. She exhaled slowly. Mr. Cole, this changes everything. This is strong, very strong. And the child isn't mine, Ethan finished. She nodded. Legally, you will need DNA confirmation. But once that's done, her entire narrative collapses. That was the plan. But he didn't tell her the part that mattered most. He didn't tell her he already knew how devastated Maya would be. Not because she'd lose him, but because she'd lose the story she'd built. Alicia leaned forward. We can proceed whenever you're ready. But I need you to understand. Once you begin this process, there's no going back. Ethan stared at the divorce papers. She slid toward him blank for now, but waiting. I understand, he whispered. And for the first time, he truly did. When he returned home, Maya was in the living room, surrounded by baby catalogs. She didn't look up. Babe, look at this crib, she said, smiling to herself. It's perfect. Don't you think so? He looked at her. At the woman he once loved without question. At the woman who now sat in front of him, weaving lies with happy little hums. He walked behind her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. It's beautiful, he murmured. She leaned into his touch, content and oblivious. She thought she'd won. She thought she was in control. She thought he was still the same man she could deceive with a soft smile and a warm hug. But the truth was inevitable, unavoidable, immovable, and already in motion. Soon, a DNA test would speak louder than her lies. Soon, her perfect story would collapse under its own weight. Soon, the world she built on betrayal would shatter, and Ethan would finally walk away, not as the abandoned husband, but as the man who survived the truth she tried so desperately to hide. The day Maya went into labor was colder than expected. A sharp, biting wind, sweeping across Harborview, rattling windows and bending tree branches, as though the world itself sensed something turbulent about to unfold. Ethan had slept on the very edge of the bed the night before, staring at the ceiling long after Maya slipped into a peaceful, oblivious sleep. Her breathing was steady, even, trusting. Trust. What an ironic concept now. At dawn, she shook him awake, clutching her belly, face drawn with discomfort. I think it's time, she whispered. He sat up slowly, his chest tightening, not with fear, not with excitement, but with an eerie, focused resolve. This was the moment everything had been building toward, the moment he had spent months preparing for in silence. He nodded, grabbed her hospital bag, and helped her to the car. As he drove, Maya squeezed his hand between contractions. Ethan, thank you for being here. He didn't respond. She didn't notice. At the hospital, chaos unfolded around them, nurses rushing, the squeak of wheels on linoleum floors, the sharp smell of antiseptic hanging heavy in the air. Ethan followed her room to room, offering support, holding her hand, wiping her forehead. Anyone watching would have thought he was the picture of a loving husband, but behind every gentle touch was a steel-cold truth she didn't know yet. This wasn't their child. This was the final piece of evidence. Hours passed. Her contractions strengthened. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped rhythmically, marking the slow march toward birth. At one point, when the nurse stepped out, Maya reached for him, voice soft and trembling. I know things have been hard this year, but this baby is going to make everything better. You'll see. This is our fresh start. Ethan held her gaze for a moment, studying the woman who had once been his entire future. Her eyes were filled with hope. Blind, ignorant hope. She wasn't acting now, not in this moment. She truly believed he was the one being healed. He offered her a small nod, not trusting himself to speak. If she only knew how close the truth was. When the pain peaked and she was moved to the delivery room, the process intensified. The nurses offered words of encouragement. The doctor gave instructions. Maya squeezed Ethan's hand hard enough to bruise, screaming through each push. Finally, the cries of a newborn broke through the sterile air. The baby's voice was sharp, loud, desperate for life. Maya sobbed with joy. "Our baby, Ethan, look. Look." Ethan stepped forward, chest tightening at the sight of the tiny child pink. Wrinkled, delicate, innocent. So innocent it hurt him. The baby was not at fault. None of this was the baby's fault. The nurse lifted the newborn toward him. Would Dad like to cut the cord? He hesitated, for a single moment, watching that small life squirm in the nurse's hands. He felt his resolve wavered just a fraction. A tiny part of him imagined an alternate universe where Maya had been faithful, where this child truly was his, where they were the couple he once thought they were. But reality crushed the fantasy instantly. He shook his head. "She should," he said gently, stepping aside. Maya cut the cord, tears streaming down her face. She reached for the baby immediately, pressing tiny fingers to her lips, as though this child were the embodiment of every dream she'd ever had. She didn't notice the way Ethan's expression didn't change. She didn't see the distance in his eyes. She didn't feel the shift in the air as a nurse quietly approached him. "Mr. Cole," the nurse murmured softly, "the paperwork you requested." He took the sealed envelope without meeting her eyes. A discreet DNA collection done immediately after birth, handled with quiet professionalism by the hospital staff he'd arranged to speak with weeks before. The sample had been taken from the cord blood while Maya was distracted with the baby. Everything was already in motion. The nurse slipped away unnoticed. Maya smiled at him from her hospital bed, cradling the child. "Come, hold your son." He approached slowly, carefully, lowering himself into the chair beside her. She rested the baby in his arms, watching him with glowing expectation, and the moment Ethan touched the child, something in his heart cracked. Not breaking, not bursting, but shifting. The baby was warm, soft, small, a living reminder of two betrayals woven together. He held him gently, supporting his head, studying the tiny features. The child wrinkled his nose in a way that tugged at something deep inside Ethan's chest. Maya leaned closer, whispering, "He looks just like you. Lie, sweet, poisonous lie." He didn't answer. A nurse tapped lightly on the door, asking Maya to sign breastfeeding consent forms. She handed the baby back to Ethan and stepped away for a moment. The room felt impossibly quiet. Ethan looked down at the child so fragile, so unaware of everything swirling around him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. "None of this is your fault." The baby's fingers curled around his thumb. Something twisted in Ethan's chest. He would never be this child's father, but he would not hate him. He would not let bitterness stain this moment. He placed a gentle kiss on the baby's forehead, a silent apology for the chaos he was born into. When Maya returned, she found Ethan sitting straighter, jaw set, gaze firm. "What's wrong?" she asked, sensing something. "Nothing," he said, but his voice was different, controlled, decisive. She didn't recognize the warning. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived while Maya slept. Ethan opened it with steady hands. Inside, the DNA results. He didn't need to read the entire document. The conclusion was printed clearly at the top. Probability of paternity, 0%. There it was. The truth. Cold, clinical, indisputable. Ethan exhaled slowly, a long, shaky breath that rattled what remained of his illusions. This was the final key, the final nail, the undeniable proof she could never explain away. He folded the paper carefully, slipped it into his bag, and sat beside Maya's hospital bed. She stirred awake, smiling drowsily. "Hey, what are you doing up so early?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. "You and I need to talk," he said softly. She blinked, confused. "About what?" "About the baby," he said. Her expression shifted instantly, fear flickering, then disappearing behind a mask of practiced calm. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Ethan reached into his bag, pulled out the DNA results. and placed them on her lap like a judge placing a verdict before the guilty. She stared, then paled, then looked up at him in horror. "Ethan, what is this? Why would you—" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't tremble. He didn't flinch. "I know, Maya." Her face collapsed. He continued, voice steady, almost heartbreakingly gentle. "I know whose baby this is. I know about the hotel. I know about Adrian. I know everything." She shook her head violently, tears springing to her eyes. No, Ethan. This isn't what you think. Stop lying," he said quietly. "For once, just stop." Her sob broke through the room like a shattering glass. "You don't understand," she cried. I had to." "You didn't have to do anything," he cut in, "except tell the truth." The silence that followed felt infinite. She sobbed harder, reaching for him. But he stepped back. "I'm filing for divorce," he said. The words fell like a hammer. "No, Ethan. Please no. Please don't do this. We can fix this." He shook his head. "No, Maya. You broke something you can't fix." Her cries rose, frantic, desperate. But Ethan didn't waver. His heart wasn't hard, just resolved. Resolved in a way it had never been before. He looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in the bassinet. "He deserves a life without lies," Ethan said softly. "As do I." Then, with one final look at the woman he once loved, he turned and walked out of the room, not as a victim, not as a broken man, but as someone finally free. Ethan didn't cry when he left the hospital room. He didn't shake. He didn't rage. He walked through the hallway with a calm so steady it felt almost surreal, like he had stepped into someone else's body, someone far stronger than the man he had been mere months ago. Nurses rushed past him. Families laughed in waiting rooms. A newborn's cries echoed down the corridor. Life pulsed all around him, raw and chaotic and beautiful. But inside Ethan, a quiet stillness reigned. Not emptiness, not numbness, just freedom. For the first time in over a year, he could breathe without pain slicing through his chest. Outside, the cold December air slammed into him, burning his lungs with its sharpness. He welcomed the sting. He needed something real, something honest, because every moment with Maya had become built on lies thick enough to suffocate a man. He stood by his car for several minutes, hands gripping the roof, as he let the magnitude of what he'd done wash over him. He had walked away. He had finally walked away, and Maya could no longer pull him back into her web. But the battle wasn't over, not yet. The next few months unfolded like a series of small earthquakes, aftershocks of the truth that had detonated inside that hospital room. Maya didn't accept the divorce quietly. She called. She texted. She showed up at the apartment door, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming, sometimes begging, sometimes furious. "Ethan, please. We can fix this. Just come back. You're abandoning me when I need you most. How could you be so cruel? You're making a mistake. You're emotional. You don't know what you're doing. Fine, leave." Then, "But you'll regret giving up on your family." He didn't answer any of it. He forwarded everything to Alicia, his attorney, who kept her expression neutral every time she reviewed another batch of messages. Maya's words weren't love. They were control dressed as affection, manipulation, disguised as remorse. But Ethan no longer lived in that world. He had stepped out of the fog. The divorce proceedings were brutal, but not in the way Ethan feared. He had proof, dates, receipts, GPS logs, recordings of financial patterns, medical documentation of his vasectomy, and the DNA test that had torn the veil off everything Maya built. Alicia guided him with surgical precision. Maya arrived to the first hearing with Adrian at her side, a desperate move that exposed her more than anyone could have imagined. She tried to appear composed, but her hands trembled, her eyes darting nervously. When the judge reviewed the documents, his face tightened. "Mrs. Cole," he said sternly, "the evidence presented here is extensive. It shows a clear pattern of infidelity and intentional deception. The court does not look kindly upon attempts to mislead a spouse into assuming parental responsibility for a child that is not biologically his. Maya's face crumpled. She whispered, "I didn't mean," but her voice died under the weight of the truth. Adrian shifted uncomfortably beside her. Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than heartbreak ever could. In the end, Ethan was granted a clean financial separation, zero responsibility for the child, biologically or legally, protection from further harassment or manipulation, the ability to move out and start fresh without Maya's shadow lurking behind him. Maya was left with Adrian, who visibly wilted when the judge stated, "The biological father will assume legal and financial responsibility for the child." Adrian didn't protest, but his expression said everything. He hadn't planned for this. He hadn't planned for truth. He hadn't planned to be exposed. Maya looked at him desperately for reassurance, but he didn't meet her gaze. For the first time, Ethan saw fear in her eyes, not fear of losing him, but fear of facing the consequences she had long believed she could avoid. Ethan moved out 2 weeks later. He didn't take much, just clothes, some sentimental items, a few books, and his grandmother's plant he kept on the windowsill. He found a small apartment overlooking the bay. Pale morning light filtered through the blinds, soft and golden, scattering across untouched floors. The first night he slept there, the silence felt unusual wide, stretching, almost electric. He lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of waves, the echo of a life rebuilding itself from quiet wreckage. And, for once, silence didn't hurt, it healed. He started therapy regularly, working with Dr. Price on untangling the emotional knots Maya had tied around him for years. Sessions were hard, painful, sometimes exhausting, but each one peeled away another layer of guilt, shame, and misplaced responsibility. "You survived something devastating, Doctor," Price told him one afternoon. "But survival isn't the end of the story. Now you get to write the part where you build something of your own." Ethan nodded, letting the words settle like seeds. Weeks turned into months. He built new routines, morning jogs along the water, quiet dinners cooked just for himself, weekend hikes, and therapy sessions. Slowly, the heaviness inside him became lighter. He laughed again. Not often, not loudly, but genuinely. One morning, while at a small coffee shop near the pier, he met someone. Her name was Claire Benson, a writer who worked from her laptop, usually accompanied by a stack of notebooks and a gentle smile. They exchanged polite nods for weeks before she finally said hello. There was nothing dramatic in their first conversation. No romantic spark or sweeping music. Just kindness, warmth, ease. The kind of connection that didn't demand anything from him. Over time, their conversations deepened. She asked about his favorite books, his architecture projects, the coastlines he loved photographing. She never asked about his past, unless he offered. She never pried where it hurt. She simply existed beside him in a way that felt soft, honest, safe. He didn't fall in love with her, not yet. He wasn't ready. But he felt something new blooming quietly in his chest. Possibility. A life beyond betrayal. A life not built on lies. A life where he could breathe. One evening, several months after the divorce, Ethan stood on the pier, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky burned with color, amber, rose, violet, reflecting on the water like fire. The wind brushed against his skin, cool and gentle. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since his world shattered, he didn't think of Maya. He didn't think of the lies, the betrayal, the lost future. He thought of himself, his strength, his resilience, his new beginning. He whispered softly, "I'm free." It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was healing. Hard-earned, slow-grown, deep and true. And as he walked home along the wooden pier, footsteps steady, breath calm, heart unburdened, he carried one truth with him. Sometimes, the life you rebuild from ashes is far stronger than the one that burned. Life has a way of breaking us open to reveal the truths we've ignored for too long. Ethan's story reminds us that love built on lies isn't love at all. It's a prison disguised as comfort. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what's familiar and choose ourselves instead. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a slow reclaiming of strength, dignity, and self-worth. When betrayal shatters our world, it also hands us a chance to rebuild with clearer eyes and a stronger heart. And in that rebuilding, we often discover the version of ourselves we were always meant to become. If Ethan's journey moved you or touched something in your own life, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy stories that heal, challenge, and inspire, don't forget to subscribe for more.